Okay, welcome back to the podcast. 2 pints of water and a packet away. So we've got a different episode for you today. Last couple of episodes have been totally different, and again, we're going with something a bit different today. So we've got another guest on for you, a returning guest, Andy Scott. So welcome back to the podcast, Andy.
How you doing? How you boys doing?
Good.
All good. Glad to have you back on. So for those of you who haven't listened to Andy's previous episode we did, that was kind of one of our first guest episodes, I think, back in the first lockdown, I think it was done.
2020 sometime, yeah.
Jesus.
So I know. So if you haven't already listened to that, go back and listen to that first. Because we kind of go into the nuts and bolts of bodybuilding, Andy's journey up until that point, obviously. So maybe listen to that before this one if you haven't already done so. So since then, Andy, if you can think back, tell the listeners, in case they've been living under a rock and haven't followed your stuff, just give us a little update as to what you've been up to, competitions, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so if it was the first lockdown, that means in 2021, I competed at the Arnold Classic UK and came second to Greg Taylor at that. I was really happy with that look. Leading into the show, at my qualifier, I wasn't the happiest with how full I was. My physique doesn't look good when it's flat. It really doesn't. Because I've not got a big chest, not got big shoulders, so we didn't really quite correct that for the Arnold UK. But I came in just even tighter, so I was ultra peeled for it and ultra streamlined, and I did quite like that look, but it wasn't enough to win that day, unfortunately. So I came second to Greg. Off the back of that prep, I don't know if I said to you, Matt, but I just felt like I wasn't done. I put in that amount of work and effort, and I just felt like it wasn't one show, it was two because of the qualifier, but the qualifier was a piece of piss, to be honest. So I was like, right, I'm going to do the biggest show I can possibly do. So in my opinion, one of the biggest shows you can do as an amateur is the Arnold Classic USA. So went there, and that is now my best look, I think, ever. I was full, I was peeled to the bone, I was shredded. I came second again to Andrew Jack, who is currently wiping the floor in the Pro League right now. For those who don't know what Andrew Jack is, he's just he's Ronnie Coleman in the making. He will be. If he wants to be Ronnie Coleman, Ronnie Coleman. If he wants to be Mr. Olympia, he will be in the next 5 years, without a doubt. So just to get beat by him wasn't as sore as it was getting beaten by Greg, basically. Obviously, I was happy for Greg. He's my best mate, so it's. But there's that rivalry that goes there hand in hand. You know what I mean? And then came off the back of the Arnold USA and decided to do another pro qualifier 4 weeks later at the Ben Weider in London. And my physique was just ruined by that point. I came fourth at that. I got beat by two guys I don't feel should have ever beaten me if I was at 100%. But leading into that show, I could just tell that my physique was a little bit tired. I was a little bit fatigued, and it was just done. I was a year of dieting, almost an entire year. So I did do my best that show, but you live and learn. And then after that, obviously, I called it a day. I was like, I need to stop now before I actually hurt myself. So, and since then, I jumped straight back into an off season. I didn't bother reverse diet. I didn't bother keeping it too clean in the rebound. Well, it was clean, but it was I just went back to super high calories. Not far off where I am right now. And basically my thought process was I've done a year in being in a depleted state. I need to bounce my body right back up quickly, get my body weight up, get my strength back. And right off the bat, I think I added quite a bit of muscle off the back of that. So I was really chuffed for that. And right now, I'm just, like I said to you before we started recording, I'm just proper in the midst of a big off season now. So a bit sluggish, tired 24/7, but it is definitely paying off. I wouldn't be doing it if it wasn't. So reached definitely kind of the heaviest and strongest I've ever been. So can't really complain on that front.
Yeah, I think as well, one thing to add is obviously a lot of our listeners, Andy, aren't bodybuilding people. They get little bits from what we spoke about, what I've spoke about with prep and everything, and from episodes like yourself before. But I feel like unless you've been there, unless you've been stage lean, unless you've had seriously low levels of body fat, you don't know how difficult it is to stay like that for a long period of time. So the fact that you spent so long in prep, like, I just want to like reiterate to those people listening, like, it really does take its toll on the body, and it is brutal peaking multiple times a year.
Yeah, 100%. It was so after the Arnold UK, I took, I think it was 5 weeks of like, that's not even, you know as well, that's not even an off season, but that's like the time I kind of technically took off between starting the next prep. So yeah, it was a really long one, and like you said, your body's not supposed to look like that. You know, you've got every appetite hormone, every cell in your, every DNA in every cell telling you need to go eat. Like, you are proper depleted. There's a reason why, you know, dieting is so hard, is because we've got those evolutionary signals in our brain constantly telling us, like, go eat, go do this, go do that. That's what's kept us alive for so long. So you're fighting that and doing it for a year. It becomes very, very taxing, and you do get broken down mentally. But the good thing is that I'd already done a year's prep before. I'd done that in 2019. Pretty much the same outcome as well. My last show was my worst show in that year. But yeah, it's like you said, you have to experience it. Like, I always bring my mum as an example. She's been around me since I started when I was 19, started competing anyway, and she still can't like basically like, look, Mum, I'm really tired. Like, please don't nag at me for anything. Blah 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 blah. But she still will, but because she just doesn't understand that mindset where like you're just constantly snappy, you're constantly just ready to like argue and fight. Exactly. So it's a strange place to be, especially for a length of time. So like
your body physically and biologically, you're fighting like 200,000 years of evolution to get into bodybuilding shape. So to continue that for an extended period of time is just like way more difficult than it sounds on paper. I'd say.
Yeah,
like,
100%.
You know, obviously, like when I was in prep and stuff, people are like, "Oh, can you not just like keep going?" Because obviously, like the way it works with PCA, like Scottish to British, is like, how many months is that, Andy? It's like, well, like 6 months. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And like people are like, "Oh, you can do the British." And I'm like, "No, I'm not going to diet. I'm not going to diet for like an entire year." You know?
Yeah.
And like, especially when there's improvements to be made. You know?
Yeah. I was just saying this to a client yesterday. It's mental, the difference where when you're dieting, the time between meals feels like a year.
Yeah.
Like literally a year. Whereas when you're in off season, it's like, I thought I ate 10 minutes ago. You know what I mean? But I always say, like, the hardest thing I've ever done in my life is diet to that extreme. And if you look at anything on top of that, like business related, PT related, relationships related, everything is kind of, nothing's really that as hard as that. So dieting for for about 11 years has kind of taught me that you can put up with a lot on in other aspects of your life. So it has kind of teetered over into other aspects, but I think I'm sure you've seen that as well. Just in terms of like that discipline transcends to other parts of your life. So
yeah, it builds resilience.
Yeah, sorry. For people that obviously are not the bodybuilders of our listeners, Andy, when you say you dieted at extreme for a year, do you want to give a little bit of context as to maybe where your calories started and then maybe where they ended up? And obviously was a year process.
Yeah. So in 2021, I was working with a coach called Patrick Cheer, who taught me a lot in terms of the calories. He basically just gave me a list of food. He didn't tell me what my calories were, but okay. I kind of roughly, I was probably about just over 6,000 calories. And by the end of that diet, I was probably I must have been just over 2,000, I think, roughly around there. So a 4,000 calorie drop per day at a body weight, you know. So I competed with Patrick, I competed at 234 and 237. So that's like no body fat from that level of calories is, and being that heavy, that's a huge drop. That's probably like equivalent of someone who's on a 3,000 calorie diet dropping to like 1,300. In terms of the ratios. So it was that, like I said, you're not supposed to be in that state.
No.
Your body kind of fights you in every aspect. So it was tough. But again, though, that was brought down gradually over 16 weeks.
Yeah.
That wasn't done right off the bat. But yeah, it's when your body just kind of it wants to shut down in every way possible. And that is the beauty of bodybuilding and not just bodybuilding, but when you're looking at kind of fat loss diets and as PTs, you're finding ways of just like, I don't say tricking the body, but you know what I mean? You can find these manipulations and stuff just to keep progress coming, because you are fighting like you said, an evolutionary system that's been around for hundreds of thousands of years to keep you alive. So you have to do wee things like, you know, higher carb days, pull fatigue out certain places, push cardio up, take things out here, push things in there. So it's a really amazing process, but it's also, you know, a pretty tough one as well. So yeah, fair job. Yeah.
Right. So what we'll do is we'll get into our topic. So that's a little update on Andy.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No. So what we're going to do today is we're going to discuss training intensity. So it's something that for a health and fitness podcast, we haven't actually went into that much. We've talked about a lot of different topics, and we thought who better to get on than Andy for training intensity. So so basically when it comes to training intensity, like, do you want to describe, like, in your own words, Andy, what would you call like high intensity training?
So high intensity training to me is, we're talking about just like a program setup, is a low volume approach, taking every working set to complete concentric failure. So i.e. you can't lift anymore. That to me is high intensity training. It's got nothing to do with rest periods. It's simply about where you can take the muscle within that given working set. That to me defines high intensity. So if you're going to consider something a lesser intensity, that would be like your standard like Flex Magazine workouts, like 3-4 sets, 10 to 15 reps type stuff. That's low intensity to me, because you're not taking the muscle and the body to that level of fatigue. So
yeah, and I think for a lot of people as well, like traditionally when you start training, or for most people when they start training, they will get into the more sort of like basic approach of 3 to 4 working sets of 8 to 12 reps, hypertrophy training, or something close equivalent anyway. And do you want to kind of explain in your own way why your way is optimal and why the high intensity variation for hypertrophy you think is better for building muscle?
So the high intensity, low volume approach that I just described there, I feel once you've established that neurological connection with your training, that's when you can move on to that. So I wasn't knocking the 3 to 4 sets of whatever 8 to 12 reps. That style of training I feel is good for the beginner and intermediate trainer, because it builds up that, I mean, lifting is a skill to an extent. You have to learn how to lift properly. You have to learn how to execute the exercise properly. And you're building that connection with your brain in order to lift the weight as efficiently as possible. So I'm not saying it's all relative to where you are in your goals. But once you've established that point, I feel that the 1 or 2 working sets to failure is optimal, because we're trying to maximally stimulate the muscle as possible. And the maximum you can possibly do is putting the muscle under that amount of stress for us under a working set. Now, if you've fully taxed the muscle in that way, you should only be able to do 1 working set, and then maybe like a back off set where we reduce the weight and go for a higher slightly rep range. So that is, if done right, there shouldn't be any other stimulus that you can possibly apply that would be a positive one. So that's why to me taking the muscle to that level of failure is the most optimal way, because that's literally as far as you can take the muscle in terms of still reaping positive benefits out of it before it starts getting detrimental, where you're just injuring yourself basically on purpose.
Yeah, I was trying to explain it to clients, like in terms of the most basic way of thinking about the physical side of it. We can go into the mental side of it after, because that's probably more complex, but like the physical element of it is, you know, ultimately what you're trying to achieve with weight training or with any resistance-based workout is stimulus adaptation, right? So stimulus is what you're doing, the sets and reps, the weights, and then the adaptation is what happens post in recovery. So if you're doing a set, let's say you're doing 4 sets of 10, 8, 9, and 10, if you're managing that same weight for 4 sets of 10, you're not really forcing adaptation, because the stimulus isn't so brutal that it's forcing your body to think, right, we need an adaptation, we need change. Whereas if you're taking a set, like you said, Andy, to complete concentric failure, you can't lift the weight, you can't concentrically move the weight anymore. You're literally giving your body such a harsh stimulus that it almost like goes into like a state of like shock and panic, and it forces a more considerable adaptation from that workout. So that's the way I try and describe it to clients, is like, what's harder on the body, what shocks the body more, and it's that sort of like harsh stimulus that makes a change. You know, if you're going to concentric failure through 10 reps, I always use 10 reps as an example, but like if you're going to concentric failure in 10 reps, 8, 9, and 10 is really the harsh stimulus. You know, 1 to 7 doesn't build you new muscle, because that's something the muscle can do comfortably. So for people listening that are struggling to get their head around the sort of like the physical adaptation side of it, I think that's the best way to try and think about it, is the last couple of reps in a really, really difficult failure set is where you're actually making change. You're causing those micro tears within the muscle, which then go on to be repaired. But that's how I kind of like describe it as well. We're trying to just put as much stress into a short period of time as possible. And I think what you said as well, I just want to come back to that. What you said about beginners, intermediates, and advanced, the differences between them, those 3 categories, is quite important, because you guys will find this as well, like PTing on the gym floor, for example. Like, you'll take a beginner, and if you try and teach them how to squat or deadlift, it's usually like a massacre in technique the first few reps that they try. It's quite painful. It's usually a massacre in technique, and like, you know, you'll give them like the perfect demo, and their first attempt at an empty bar RDL or whatever looks like something out of The Exorcism, you know. It's like, it's just horrific. So like at that neurological level of beginner mode, someone can't physically train to failure, in my opinion. Not that they should be doing that anyway, but they can't physically do it because they haven't built up that neurological pathway. 100%. I think once that's built, you can do it. But, you know, for people listening to this who are beginners and intermediates, that's not me saying you don't train hard. That's me saying that on complex movements, you shouldn't be training hard, because you'll probably hit technical breakdown before you get anywhere near muscular failure. You know? If, for example, if you watch, I uploaded a squat video the other day. I didn't take that set to failure, but the previous one that I uploaded did. If you watch that set, you'll see that every single rep is exactly the same. And you might watch that going, oh, wait a minute, he had like 2 or 3 left. I was like, no, my technique is so perfect for me that I can channel every ounce of energy to the working muscle rather than like shaking or showing any kind of signs of obvious fatigue. It's the execution is so meticulous that every like I said there, every ounce of energy is being put through their legs. Where you watch a beginner squat, you know, their hips are shifting all over the place, knees are going back and forth. It really is a bit of a dog's dinner sometimes, but that is the kind of relative difference in terms of just like the execution between a beginner and someone who's advanced. So like you said, you can't take a set to failure if you haven't, you know, developed those patterns, those lifting patterns.
As well, it's interesting as well, isn't it? Because like when you are a beginner, you haven't got that neurological pathway that we're on about. You haven't actually just practiced it enough either, especially if it's something that you've never done. And as well, something interesting that you said there is like, when you're in it, you're putting every thought, like you're not thinking about like, oh, I've got to go pick up the kids later, or what am I making for dinner, or oh, my shoelace is untied, because like you can notice these things when you're doing a set, but like a beginner usually can't fully put themselves in the mindset of being like, right, I have 7-8 reps here that I need to get my shit together because this is going to be hell. And beginners just can't put themselves to there.
No way. No way. And if you tried, I'm pretty sure you wouldn't have that client for very long.
No. So, they wouldn't respond well to it either, because they'd be like, who the fuck's this guy?
This guy's a dick.
Fucking psychopath.
So that kind of leads me into what I was going to go into next. I mean, we'll come back around and probably go into back into the physical side of it. But I want to go into the mental side of it, particularly with you, Andy, because I know you're really big on this. And I remember you put up a video maybe like a couple of years ago now talking about the mental side of training and how basically like, you know, the body will, I mean, anyone who trains hard knows this, but the body will go wherever the mind takes it, right?
Yeah.
So like, do you want to kind of explain the mental approach you have, not like what you tell clients to do, like the mental approach you have going into like a big set, like a squat, deadlift, hack, you know, something like that?
Yeah. So like I'll just describe like a big heavy set with a compound lift. For instance, like I listen to very, very heavy metal when I train. I've got a psychopath for a training partner as well who screams at me. There's music blaring in the gym, and when I'm doing my set, I can't hear any of that. Because my mind is just so tunnel vision focused on channeling every single ounce of energy through the bar or through the machine. I've described it before as like, it is like the pinnacle of aggression, lifting weights, you know, at that level. And I think I come from a rugby background, so, you know, you're talking about high testosterone, high aggressive sport. So for me to channel that aggression into a lift was relatively easy as I came up the ranks and as my training developed. But for myself, I'm trying to lock myself into just like another world, basically. That's kind of basically how I describe it. And it may look very alien, it may look very aggressive, it may look very violent to someone that's watching it, but it's insanely controlled and insanely methodic. That's kind of how I picture myself going up to the bar. I don't want to use like battle analogies because I think that's quite cringe, but I'm trying to think like, how aggressive can I possibly be, you know, going up to this bar? Like there will be times where, just say it's like a new lift, I do this particularly with deadlifts. I don't know why it's just deadlifts, or RDLs, but like I look at the bar and I pretend like it doesn't like me. So that kind of like, it's so strange, but like you personify the weight, and you know that just builds up another level of aggression when you go into a weight. I mean, I can legit add 10, 20 kilo to a lift just by channeling my mind into the set. Like you said, Matt, like your mind can make your body overcome anything. You know, you see these, like, I don't know if it's ever true or if it's ever been demonstrated, but people say that, like, just say like a car like runs over like a small child, the mother would be able to lift the car off the child. Yeah. Now, I don't know if that's ever been demonstrated, but I'm sure she'll put a fucking cracking effort into, you know, do that, just because that's where you channel in your mind. And a lot of top trainers and coaches have used like the analogy of imagine like someone's like holding a gun to like someone who you love's head, and if you don't do the set for 6 to 10 reps, they're going to pull the trigger.
Yeah.
So if you can, that's kind of like the level of aggression and drive that a lot of top bodybuilders, a lot of top powerlifters, a lot of top strength athletes put into their lifts. They take themselves to that very, very kind of aggressive place. And we've spoken about beginners there, and it's next to impossible to convey that to someone who's just lifting for the first time. No beginner needs to be trying to even go near that. You know, that took me a long time to get to that level of mentality. And like I said, I already had a very aggressive like sport prior to that as well. So I kind of had an upper hand in that whole lifting aspect. But that's kind of where my mind is when I train for heavy lifts like that.
And Andy, would you say that when you're dieting, or certainly when you're getting more into the dieting phase of things, would you say that you have to work a bit harder for that aggression to be there? Because obviously, you know, when you're full of calories and full of carbs, you know, a lift can be a lot easier. But when you're depleted of a lot of that stuff, like, does the aggression come so easily? Like, do you have to, I suppose, G yourself up a little bit more? Like, how harder does it get for you?
So for me, this actually touches on another subject in terms of fatigue. But when I'm in like the depths of a diet, when I'm really kind of just, you know, irritable, starving all the time, I'm a little bit more aggressive, because most people are, you know, you hear the term like hangry. You know, people are angry because they're hungry. That's literally, that is a real thing. You know, you do become like your reactions are faster, like you're more aggressive. Again, that just comes back to the evolutionary thing. So when I'm dieting and lifting, I actually find it a tad easier to be aggressive because I'm already in that kind of irritable mindset, so to speak. Yeah, so that's kind of where I am. But I think that's been my problem in the past, is my body's getting more and more depleted. And as I'm approaching the show, I should be backing off my training, but I'm channeling that irritability into the training to be as aggressive as possible. And I'm lifting weights that my body isn't in the condition to lift purely because I can make my mind do it. There was some times in that last contest prep there where I stood back from the lift, spoke to my training partner, and I said, I can't believe I just did that, because like you've just channeled your mind into this one thing. And so I need to look, for me personally, my development would be in the past is to actually tone down that level of intensity as I get nearer to the show. Because, you know, if I'm still pulling like a 260 kilo deadlift at 3 weeks out when I've got no body fat, that's very, very inefficient.
Yeah.
So
going back to the mindset element of it as well, like we'll come back to the CNS because I want to speak about that as well. But like the mindset element, do you think, like, just your personal opinion, not from a scientific standpoint, do you think like everyone can do that, or do you think it's like individual dependent?
No, I think it's very. No, I don't think everyone can do that.
I agree.
I've been around incredible bodybuilders who have competed who can't train like that. They don't want to train like that. I mean, we spoke about Greg Taylor already. Like he's very similar to me in terms of that taking your mind and your body to that certain place. And like, watch what he lifts. Like, I mean, you train the same. I don't know if Dan, you train in warehouse as well, but you've probably seen it in real life. It's fucking terrifying when he walks up to a bar or walks up to a lift and does that. So I kind of went off on a tangent there.
So I was basically asking you if you think everyone can do it.
Right, yeah. And yeah, I've worked with so many people over the years that some have it and some really don't. But that's okay. You know, we're not all built the same. Our minds aren't all the same. We're not all wired that way. You get people who are naturally aggressive. You get people who are naturally passive. It's just one of those things. And there's something for everyone. And you can, without a doubt, train with weights, no matter what your mindset is or how, or what background you come from, how aggressive you are, anything like that. So,
yeah.
And how long would you say that, like, I would say obviously taking things to failure and training at a really high intensity as well, just like lifting itself is a skill. I don't think anyone can just go and do it. How long would you say it took you to get to the point of like really pushing things to the absolute max? Like how many years, and how did you what was your sort of like process towards that? Can you think of any particular point where you were like, right, I'm going to have to start notching things up, even when in your own mind you're thinking, but I'm already training pretty hard here?
Yeah, so I know exactly the moment that happened.
Right.
So I started training when I was 16, properly. I've done a bit of rugby before, but not proper sessions and that. And then stopped playing rugby, and I was like, okay, I'll do a bodybuilding show. And so I've been training up to this point. That's about 2 years in, just kind of copying workouts from magazines and stuff. And then I was like, well, if I want to compete, I'm going to go to the best competitor in the city. So obviously I'm from Aberdeen. So at the time was Graham Park. Graham was a former Mr. Universe. So went and spoke to him, and he kind of laid the groundwork for me. And that still continues to this day. Like I've always said, I owe Graham a lot. But anyway, he put me through a chest session. I don't even know if he remembers it, but it was the first exercise. It was a plate-loaded chest press at Bodyworks when that existed. And he done 2 sets with me, and I was like, that's harder than my leg session. I couldn't believe the level of intensity that he put into that. I was like, right, okay, this is what I need to do.
Yeah.
And, you know, he showed me that. And then just from there, I kind of just put it into every other session. I started watching people that he told me I should be watching, like Dorian Yates and trainers like that. very low volume, high intensity trainers. And from that point, it kind of just manifested to what it is now, where when I train now, I don't need to switch on everything. That's very, very automatic. I don't even think anymore now. I know where I need to be. I know where my mind needs to be. I know where my hands, my feet, everything need to be from the get-go. There's very little, I don't want to say thought process. That's not what I'm trying to say, but I'll say thought process for now. That's how I approach my sessions. They're just so automatic now. It's like it's ingrained. But that was the moment where I was like, right, fuck that. This is training. So
I was gonna just add in what you said about like you and Greg and the way like Greg thinks, and obviously Greg's like off the top of my head anyway, the only guy from around here that's like your kind of level, you know. And obviously he trains at Warehouse. I train. I mean, I've trained with Greg a few times, and like when I've done legs with Greg, like it is like super intense, you know, like really intense. And I don't think I don't think people realize how intense you've got to be to get to that level. And like I've said this a few times to people, because people think that training is just like, it's like you go in, you train, you do your sets, and that's it. But it has to be so much more than that to build the amount of tissue that you guys have. It has to be like it almost takes over your entire thinking for like 24 hours prior to the workout. You know, like the level of intensity you guys are bringing into sessions. And like when I've trained with Greg, obviously I've seen it with him. I've seen it even the intensity he brings to like spotting me for a set. Because I usually get him to spot me for like my heavy sets when I'm doing legs without him. And the intensity he brings to that, like you just totally feed off it.
Oh yeah.
And it's like that's purely a mentality thing. It's not physical. And I think that's what people are missing a lot of the time with training. I don't know if you agree with that, but I think that.
No, I 100% agree with that. Yeah, 100%. But again, it's people haven't been shown, and it took me being shown how to train like that to actually appreciate what that actually is and that mindset is. I think that's just missing. I think people see, like, you've been in Future Fitness. Future Fitness isn't a bodybuilding gym, but so the people are around me and Chris, they, like you said before at the start of this podcast, they just see like this complete all-out manic, aggressive state, when actually it's incredibly controlled and incredibly efficient in terms of how we train. And it is missing from a lot of people's workouts and that. But it's odd, because I've always made this comparison. I'm not sure if both of you have done like spin as part of like being we have. Okay, we've all done spin as an instructor, right? And people will absolutely destroy themselves in a spin class, ruin themselves, because I don't know what it is about the human mind, but the human mind's able to, when it comes to the cardiovascular work, able to push without really thinking too much. But when it comes to weight training, the same person on that spin bike who was going tonto isn't doing that in a weight session. So it's like, well, why? It's odd. But I think I don't know where that comes from, but I always tell people, like, because I used to have clients people came to me after a spin class, asked for PT, and then I put them through a weight session. And I was like, see what you're doing during a sprint in a spin class, apply that intensity to this set on the leg press. So it's about trying to get that point across. But if you are an outsider and you haven't experienced it, or you don't know anyone who trains like that, it looks incredibly intimidating and it's incredibly off-putting. I'm not going to lie, it is. But we can appreciate, like, walking to the gym and seeing someone like myself or Greg training and be like, that's fucking awesome. I'm motivated by that. I'm feeding off that. But people who have never been there, I don't think it's the same thing. I think it's seen as very aggressive and violent, and
almost
almost puts them off. And I think that's why people kind of shy away from that kind of training.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think as well, like, I think you're sort of in two categories. One of them is like, it's almost like a physical fear of training to failure. You know, like that's going to be injury prone, or that's going to be really sore. You know, like they're just scared of like the lactic acid side of it, which is obviously just a really short-term part. And then the other side of it, I think the other like group is that people actually do in their head, they've convinced themselves, they actually believe that they are training like that.
Yeah.
But they're just physically not doing that. Like you know, there's a saying, a lot of people in the industry, like, you know, when you listen to podcasts, a lot of people say this in bodybuilding, like, you think you train hard until you see someone who trains hard.
Yeah.
Mhm.
You know,
Yeah.
I think that's definitely a thing in gyms. And that's why I say this to clients quite a lot. Your environment or the gym you're in, so your environment dictates how hard you train sometimes. So if you see, you know, if you're surrounded by people who are training at an RPE of 5 out of 10, that will naturally drip feed itself into your training.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know? Whereas I believe if you surround yourself with people who are training balls to the wall, if you surround yourself by people who are better than you in terms of bodybuilding sense, it's the same as anything, same as life. If you surround yourself with millionaires, you're more likely to become one.
Yeah.
If you surround yourself with good golfers, you're going to become one. If you play all your golf with 28 handicappers, you're going to be shite, you know? It's the same with your training. I think it does make a big impact. But I think going back to the first group that I mentioned, I definitely see that with clients I have, is that they're physically, like, it's fear that's holding them back from train to failure. I don't know if you find that as well, Andy.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Yeah. And
yeah, 100%.
And I sometimes use this saying with clients, like, it takes taking a set to failure or actually like messing up technically. You know, like when you get stuck at the bottom of a squat for the very first time, it kills the fear a little bit.
Yeah.
You know, I always say to clients, the best thing you can do if you're scared of squatting low or you're scared of squatting heavy is get stuck. It's the best thing you can do, because you figure out physically that that's the worst that can happen. You're not made of glass. You know, if you get stuck in a squat, you're not just gonna like obliterate. You know, like you'll be okay. You'll still do it next week. You know.
Yeah.
So yeah, I find it's like two like compartments, two groups of people that are scared of training to failure, and those are like their what am I looking for? Limiting factors.
Yeah, and we touch on like this is what I try and say to people. I try not to be too like aggressive with it, but the human body has survived way worse than a heavy squat set, like way worse. Like you can get hit by a 70 mile per hour car and survive. Like, granted, you'd be a bit fucked up, but you will survive failing a squat. You will survive this training session. I am not going to make you do anything that is going to harm you, like negatively. It's just fear of the unknown. People don't go there regularly. People don't go there on a daily basis. But like for me, like I said, I'll bail from a squat. I'll bail from a leg press. I know I can do it all. It's no problem at all. It's second nature now to me because I've been there so many times. But you're right, it is that fear does really take people over, and a lot of us. I mean, we're touching a bit deeper now, but a lot of the population do live very comfortable lives, and that drabs into everything. It drabs into going to the gym. It drabs into like your career. People don't want to push in their career because they want to be comfortable. They don't want to do this because it's out of their comfort zone. And I think in a society where we really try to be as comfortable as possible, that whole training to failure is just a complete flip flop of that mentality.
I totally agree with you.
I agree as well. You know, I think as well, we live in such an age where, I was going to touch on this a second ago, like where social media is really present. Like how many times do you see squat fails, leg press fails in terms of like actual real people getting hurt? Like some horrendous leg press knee dislocations on thing, but that's like a very small percentage. And if you're actually an idiot doing it with another idiot, that will happen. But as you kind of said, Andy, like, I'm not going to do anything that's going to hurt you or put you in a position that's going to, you know, compromise your health. Like, I'm actually trying to get the best out of you and get you to do things in a more way. So, like, I do definitely agree that there's a sort of preconception of things with the gym in terms of that. Like, they'll be like, oh, I've got a sore knee, so I won't do any form of legs. I don't know if you've had much experience with footballers, but footballers are the worst for being like, can't train legs at all because I've got a game on Saturday. Like, there's just
Monday, man. Like, get on with it.
Yeah, exactly. So
definitely.
One thing I was going to say as well, we haven't gone into this at all. We've obviously talked about concentric failure. Andy, what's your thoughts on going to eccentric failure?
I do that with right now. I used to train like that with every body part, but I only really do that with shoulders now, whereby I get Chris to raise the weight or the cable, and I'll fight the negative or take the negative to complete failure. I used to do it with legs a lot, but the kind of weight I'm using now that's just asking for trouble. So
Yeah.
I don't do a lot of eccentric, like forced eccentrics or anything like that. It's everything from me now is very controlled. So if anything, like an example I'll do with leg extension is I'll do a drop set after the working set, and I'll increase the length of my eccentrics with each drop. So if I'm doing a 3 second negative with it, then I'll do a 4 second with the next drop, a 5 second with the next drop, and a 6 second with the next drop. So I'm still keeping that control and just pushing the time in which that muscle's under tension. That's kind of what I do now, rather than taking the negative or the eccentric to absolute obliteration. So
that leg extension protocol sounds really fucking horrible.
Does not sound pleasant at all.
Yeah, you only do it once, thankfully, but it's I remember I said it to Chris. I was just like, he was like, what? I was like, yeah, that's what we're doing today. So yeah, I think it's Milos Sarcev that has that. So like it's a long drop set. So the prime leg extension that we use, I think I put 5.5 plates on. So yeah, you're going from 3 seconds to 4 to 5 to 6, and then a 7 second negative with the last weight drop. So yeah, it's pretty brutal. Just try it tomorrow.
I really like. I'm actually doing legs tomorrow, so I might chuck that in. Just for banner. I really like, because I train on my own for the majority of the time, and then for really heavy sets, I'll maybe call like Greg or Cammy or someone over for a spot. But one thing I've started doing a lot more recently is sort of finding ways to go beyond failure, but like safely on your own. So things I like to do, and I'd sometimes get clients to do this as well. Obviously, the typical bodybuilding drop sets is like a standard, but like I quite like rest pause. I'm using that quite a lot for upper body parts. So like you take a weight that you might manage like 10 to 12 traditionally and hit concentric failure, but you do like 18 to 20 reps with it. I think like for training on your own, I think that's probably like, personally, I find it just a more convenient way of going to failure.
I agree. Rest pausing is not something I'd done until I started coaching with Patrick, and then I think some of my stuff probably dripped into your training plan at one point. So yeah, that style of training is very efficient for people who train by themselves, because you've already proven that you can control the weight that you're away to then do another 2-3 times. So it's far more controlled, and it is far more efficient for the trainer, the single trainer.
And then again, logically, like going back to what we were talking about before about stimulus adaptation, like if you're taking a weight where you're providing a massive stimulus for adaptation through 10 to 12 reps, if you're able within a minute to do an extra few reps that way, that's just a massive stimulus for growth. So your potential for growth is basically just elongated by doing that set. But then like the flip side of that is you can't obviously do that with like every single working set. You can't go in and do, like I hear people doing, like, I don't know if you're the same, Andy, but bodybuilders that I know who actually look really good as well, and they're doing like 30 sets for chest, and I'm like, how are you doing that? I know, and these are the same people that will question the 1 set, 2 sets to failure till day's end, and you're like, just try it. And they're like, well, I don't really need to, because I mean, look at Phil Heath's a good example of that. So former Mr. Olympia, he trained like that, 3-4 sets per exercise. I never seen him taking anything to failure. And the owner of the gym that he used to train in used to say that Phil's style of training was nowhere near as intense as the other guys that he was competing against, but it worked for him. So I've done that style of training. One, I don't enjoy it. I don't even do it when I'm on holiday. And I've seen way better results using the methods that I use. So yeah, I'd agree with that. I think also, like, when it comes to like genetic, like elite, like cream of crop genetics, obviously Phil Heath is in that category. Like you can pretty much just do anything. You can, and progress.
Stare at weight, you'll grow.
Exactly.
As soon as you've typed in your code to get in the front door of the gym, like you're adapting.
Exactly.
What was I going to say? I've lost my train of thought now. Phil Heath, so it's on my mind now. I'm just like picturing as most muscular, What was I going
So
to say?
distracting.
I've lost my train of thought. Dan, you say something.
Right. What have we not went into?
Well, Dan, what do you do in terms of like training wise that's like sport specific to judo?
So I actually have changed my training really recently to this sort of style of training that you guys are on about, because I was on holiday with Matt, and I came at it from an angle that, like, I have you ever done judo, Andy?
No, I'm a secondary black belt in Taekwondo though.
Right. So judo is very similar to rugby in terms of the fact that, like, you get picked up, you get dumped on the floor, you get stood on, you get kicked, elbowed, strangled, arm locks. Maybe not in rugby, but judo anyway. So it beats up the body quite a lot. And I was kind of saying that, like, when I do extreme weight cuts to get into a category, it's usually over a short period of time. I usually weigh in the day before so I can rehydrate and refuel for the day after. And yeah, so training's very difficult at the minute, especially as well because, like, I've been doing it since I was like 9 years old and I'm now 31. So I've been throwing.
You're 31?
I'm 31, yeah.
The youngest 31-year-old I've ever seen.
So yeah, I'm still doing it. I'm still competing, and I still compete at quite a high level as well. It's funny how you're saying about Graham Park, because his daughter does judo, and that's how I first heard of Graham years ago. But yeah, so my body's quite beaten up. It doesn't recover as well as what it used to. So for me to get thrown like 200 to 300 times a week and then take myself to absolute failure on everything, like, is difficult.
Yeah.
So when I was on holiday with Matt, he took me to failure on a few things, especially my delts, which are still on fire, by the way. And yeah, I've decided to give it a go and kind of do less judo and less other things that I'm doing to give it a go. And I actually enjoy it more. Kind of the thing you said there, like, you don't enjoy the slower 3-4 sets of, 8 to 15 reps, whatever it is. Like, I now go in, and it's because I'm a lot more switched on that I know, like, I usually do 2 or 3 warm-up sets, and then I do 1 set balls to the absolute wall, and I'm not afraid to push to failure where a dumbbell could potentially drop on me or whatever. I will do it. It's a lot more enjoyable.
Yeah. It's I don't know what it is. I think for me, taking yourself to that place, being that aggressive is just fun. I love being that aggressive within that controlled environment, and that for me is what makes that kind of training fun. Like the 3 to 4 set thing, as important as it is for a beginner or someone just starting out, it's not my cup of tea. I don't think I could do that all the time.
Yeah.
So. Dan, I'm still like internally laughing at that set you did. So Andy, I took Dan through lateral raise set, and he did like 50 partials beyond failure. And like, honestly, this set took Dan about 8 minutes.
Oh, my shoulders were burning so much that I think I burnt my sleeves off, honestly. So fucking sore.
I suppose we drink like that for the rest of the day. Like that.
Yeah,
I've been there. Yeah, it's good.
One thing I was going to ask you, Andy, it's I was saying to one of my clients that we were getting you on the podcast, and he was like, "Oh, can you ask Andy something?" And I was like, "Yeah, what is it?" And he was like, "Ask him what it's like to prep you." So what's it like to prep me?
You're definitely one of the easiest people to prep ever. I don't think you complained once. No, I can't think of a time where I went, Jesus, he's fucking complaining today. No, you're insanely easy to prep, and you just kind of, you're very, I think you'd agree, you're very robotic. You like routine. You like doing the same things day in, day out. So, yeah, mate, no issues at all, start to finish.
I think he was totally looking for like the opposite answer, you know, like that's a prick.
You just ruined his day now.
I was just saying this to Reagan the other day though, like some of the clients that have been the hardest work have been PTs and coaches themselves. Yeah. It's so strange. It's so strange. I don't know if it comes from personally from my experience with the coaches and PTs that I've prepped or dieted. They come from a place of like slightly being like less motivated because they're constantly around diets and training and the gym and stuff. So they do find themselves to be a little less motivated than the general population who can go in and out of the lifestyle, like, you know what I mean? Whereas when you're stuck in a gym 24/7 or you're on your laptop 24/7 talking about diets and manipulating like values and stuff, I think that does leave some people less motivated, and that does make someone much harder to prep or diet because they're less willing to do the kind of suffering aspect of dieting. So
that logically that makes sense, to be fair. I do get that, but personally, you're probably the same way I think about it, Andy. But like personally, I'm the opposite way. Like having this chat right now makes me like love bodybuilding even more, you know, like a little smidgen more. And then like going into warehouse, I'm just like dying to train. And like I sometimes wake up and like every day I walk the dog first thing in the morning, but like I sometimes wake up and I'm out with the dog and I'm like, oh, it's a rest day today, you know. It's like a bummer. You know, so I guess it's person dependent, but like I just absolutely love it. And I find that chatting to clients, especially the ones that are doing well, they're positive, they're making progress, like chatting to them makes me want to train, makes me want to follow my plan, you know, like obviously everyone's got clients that are a bit in arse, like that is just part of coaching, but but I think it motivates me more than anything else. I think you guys are probably the same.
Definitely. I mean, like that's one of for years, I said that I didn't want to be a PT because I didn't want to combine my hobby and my job. And then when I eventually took the step to actually do that, I was like, shit, I should have done this years ago. It just worked so well. I train at like midday. You know, it's a very rewarding and very stress-free, you know, life, essentially. So,
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Sometimes like you forget that and you have a really busy day and you're like, you know, you're chasing your tail a little bit or whatever, no matter how organized you are. And then like you have a client come in and they've got like 4 kids, they've got like a 9 to 5, you know, they're like arguing with their husband or something. You're like, God, my life's so easy.
I know. It really does put things in respect. I think, do you both follow Chris Bradley on Instagram, the coach's mentor? Yeah. So he put up the pilot analogy. No, well, he put up the pilot analogy. We also put up the example of a judge. So like a Scottish judge only earns like on average, I think it's like 56,000 a year.
Okay.
And the amount of work and crap that they have to go through to be a judge, and you can earn that from personal training and coaching and have like nowhere near the stress that a judge has. That really put into perspective for me. I was like, holy shit, I'm never ever going to complain ever again, I think. So
I remember just on that topic, this is way off training intensity topic now, but like just on that topic, I remember figuring out that an FY1, so a foundation year 1 doctor in the UK working for the NHS can earn less in their first year as a doctor. Bearing in mind how difficult it is to be a doctor, you'll earn less on average than a bus driver.
That's insane, eh? That's just,
and like that's nothing against bus drivers. Like, you know, everyone, there's a place for everyone, but like obviously the training and like the academic side of it is polar opposite, you know. Even bus drivers will tell you that. I think if I was a bus driver, I'd be like, yeah, shit.
Because I've got a master's in engineering, and you were getting like some of these like jobs that were coming through. It was like starting salary 16 grand. I was like, you kidding? I could work at McDonald's and make more than that. Literally, you could. It's insane, really. Like some of the, obviously if you did work at McDonald's full time for your whole life, you are limited to a certain salary, whereas obviously a doctor or an engineer can go on to make unlimited money in certain aspects. But it's insane how can like things are structured nowadays. So
right, I think we've had plenty of Andy's time. Dan, what do you think?
Yeah, I think we've chatted enough.
I mean, don't get me wrong, I could chat all day on this topic, but like obviously we want to, if you've listened to this point, thank you.
Well done.
That's what we say as well. Like, fucking hell, people actually made it this long. Great, cheers.
Oh, before we finish up, actually, Andy, do you want to plug your podcast and your social media and stuff?
So Instagram, I'm AMS Muscle, so that's AMS, and I'm the same on YouTube as well. So on YouTube, I try to post 2 videos a month, which I've been very poor at doing the past couple of months. of just like my training. And for those who have listened to us in this podcast who want to see that training in action, so my YouTube is probably the best place to go watch that. And the bodybuilding podcast that me and Greg have is called the Scottish Silverback Podcast, which is also on YouTube. So yeah, feel free to check that out and subscribe and take it from there. We've had quite a lot of high ranking amateurs and a few professionals on as well. So it's been a really, we're trying to get more eyes on the Scottish bodybuilding scene, which is very, very small compared to the English one. So the more eyes we can get on it, kind of, show and get as many physiques, as many personalities on as we can is something we're really trying to strive towards. So we don't always get a podcast out every week, because obviously we've both got a lot on, but yeah, we really do try to. So yeah, definitely check that out.
See, Andy, when you guys don't do a podcast for a while, do you get abuse from people?
A wee bit, yeah.
Yeah, we do. Well.
Me and Dan get so much abuse when we don't put one out. It's like, you do realize we don't get anything for this.
Somebody asked me if me and Matt were dead once.
So like, I remember I was a few weeks after the Arnold, like I had this boy come up to me in the gym, and like obviously I judged the book by his cover. Like I was like, there's no way he's interested in bodybuilding. And he came up to me and he was like, when are you get the podcast up and running? And I was like, which one? What are you talking about? He's like, oh, the Silverback one. I was like, oh, do you listen to it? He's like, yeah, I listen to it every week. Like I really enjoy it. And I was like, all right, you've got plans to compete? And he's like, no, not at all. I just like listening to this is the big fucking Mongol bodybuilders talk about bodybuilding. Like, fair enough, mate. So yeah, it's a strange one. I've had quite a few people like say, like, when you get another episode out, and I really enjoy the podcast and stuff, and I'm just kind of, it's mad how, I'll listen to podcasts about like stuff that has no relevance to me at all. So it kind of just shows you that happens, on the bodybuilding side as well. So
yeah, I listen to really random podcasts. Like I really like podcasts about like space and the universe, stars and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I love that stuff. Yeah,
I quite like Brian Cox's podcast. Have you ever listened to that?
Oh yeah.
No, not actually. No.
The Infinite Monkey Cage is really good, and I sometimes think like people would look at me and be like, he would never listen to that, but it's just quite random.
You should listen to Brian Cox on Joe Rogan. It's about 10.5 hours, but it's still a good listen.
I've watched it.
It's good. Yeah, it's good. Yeah.
I think I listen to like MMA podcasts and stuff like that. I have no interest in MMA, but I love the fighter mentality.
Yeah.
Like I love that. So I love listening to fighters talk about their preparation and stuff like on the mental side of it. I'm not too interested in like what they're training. Whenever they talk about their training, I kind of like blank out a wee bit. But when they're talking about their mindset and stuff, that really to me is, I love that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Cool. Happy enough for that, Dan.
Yeah. Thanks very much for coming on, Andy. Obviously this is the second time you've been on, and I'm pretty sure it won't be the last. But thanks very much for your time, and that gives us another episode of 2 Pints of Water and a Packet Away.